Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our class today. Welcome to those of you who are in the room here right now, and those of you online. Welcome here on Sunday, the 28th of January. And first of all, those of you in the room, if you have a cell phone, please turn it off so it doesn't make any noise during the talk today. Appreciate that. Just to give you the format for today's class, Guy will give about a 60-minute talk, and then after that, we'll take a 5-minute break and then come back for a Q&A, question and answer with Guy, to where you in the room can come up here and share something that you've learned or a question you might have about the talk, anything really about your inner life. And if you're online, you can share as well. You can go to your question box or chat box and write in a question, or if you're on GoToWebinar, you can talk with Guy directly with a question. And we do encourage you to take advantage of that. It's a great time. A lot of times the second half of class is every bit as good as the first half, so do stick around and stay with us for that. If you have any technical problems online, you can go into the same place, the question box and the chat box, and Kate will help you behind the scenes, our one-person show today. So we'll do the best we can to do that. And if you're here in the room with a technical problem, forget about it. So just stay with us. All right, let's get started with class today. I'm going to read the topic and first part of the key lesson. This discovery helps you to master your desires. Here's a key lesson, part one. Because we are literally defined by our desires, we are confined to an unseen house of pain that, in turn, has transformed our fertile planet into a prison filled with frustrated inmates, none of whom can figure out why they're unable to escape the consequences of their own choices.
Good morning, everyone. None of whom can figure out why they can't escape the consequences of their own choices. That's the last thing that we believe. That whatever my experience is in any given moment, that it is a consequence of a choice that I made. And yet, in spite of the fact that we don't really believe that that's true, the first thing that happens to us when facing the consequences of our choices is to do what? Oh boy. Make another choice. Another desire. And we believe that these choices that we make are our own, that we are the one who has logically come to that moment in time where our incredible intellect, well-developed emotions, very sharp body has, the time has come for it. We're going to pull way back today and look at a really big picture. And when I give a talk that's a big picture, the purpose of it is so that a certain kind of feeling, a certain kind of note can be sounded in you. If you listen to a pianist or a cellist or some master musician and playing some kind of beautiful piece, you miss the whole reason for the experience if you are thinking about what you're hearing. Because it's a fairly clear communication between the spheres, if you will, between the music of the spheres, all that is created in the name of the word and sound, and then given to planets to express that, and then human beings and other creatures to express that. there is a vine and a branch and a vine and a branch, and what's the point if you're not there directly receiving what it is that's being given to you through that music? It is communicating something to you, is it not? So it is with what is true. What is true can't be communicated in thought. It is impossible. Even the masters of music who can look at a sheet of music and almost hear what the notes are, it isn't the same as hearing the notes themselves. You and I must learn to welcome certain impressions. Again, the intention of the talk today is to give you an impression that by and large is missing from your life, so that in hearing it, in feeling it, you might for a moment remember there is something in you that corresponds to that note. It awakens a longing, doesn't it? But when we have a longing, no matter how it's awakened, it isn't terribly long before something steps up in us and then tells us what we have to do to answer that longing. And this is hard to understand, and quite a bit will be today. Why do I long to understand and gain more of what I have been given in that moment? Why do I take a beautiful moment outside and turn it into something that I want to create around me at all times? Why? So that I can remember that sense of self that was given to me in the moment of union between what is celestial and planetary. So this is the problem that we're facing, that we're looking at together. So let's bring up the second key lesson so I can get busy with a few little demonstrations that management has prepared for you at great cost. It isn't a trick, key lesson. Read it. We think that first comes a fire and then the sound of the alarm. But the truth is, the alarm is the fire. We think that first comes a fire and then the sound of the alarm. But the truth is, the alarm is the fire. What do you think that means? Anybody? Well, in this world, there is a fire and then an alarm. But in your spiritual life, the alarm is the fire. The reaction is the fire, not what leads to putting it out. And the identification with the reaction produces an almost incessant relationship between this idea that somehow or other the experience of this fire is caused by a fire outside of me, instead of understanding I have been lit up by some kind of resistance to a moment, and now I don't know what to do with it. And so what do I do when there is a fire of a reaction inside of me? What do I do? What do you do? Just hold on a minute. I can get rid of this problem. I know exactly what I want and need to do. Piece of cake. Oh, wow, that's so much better. I mean, now I can get up. Honey, can you help me? Of course I can. I know exactly what's wrong. Thank God, because I've been struggling with this anger, this impatience, this fear, and I almost have it nailed, but maybe with your assistance. Piece of cake, she says. Just do this. Should I do this like for 45 minutes? So, how many of you get the point? I'm always trying to put out a fire. You aren't the way you're supposed to be. She isn't supposed to be doing that. Why in the name of God is the world doing the things that it's doing? And I believe that the pain that I'm experiencing is because of the condition that my reaction points to as responsible for the pain that I'm in. And the condition is not responsible for the pain that you're in. The condition, whether you understand it or not, is actually a form of karma, isolated, individuated to you and yet to everyone according to type, that by grace is revealing to you a consciousness that doesn't know what to do with its own conflict. And its conflict is always between what it wants or what it doesn't want, and whether the world is giving it what it wants or rejecting its desire in that moment. So I ask you, from where comes, how many of you have any anxiety issues at all? Did you see how nicely I did that? From where comes my anxiety? Barbara? I don't want what's happening, and when I don't, if I had my candle, I'd bring it up, because Barbara's coming up on her birthday pretty soon, by the way. Speaking of anxiety, I don't want to turn 75 years old. And so I'm going to go someplace so I can forget why I'm, so I can forget the pain. Here's the point. I don't want this because what I want is to not know myself as getting older. That's why I don't want to be 75, because it runs counter to everything that I think shouldn't be happening to me or what I want, which is to avoid the fact that my body is approaching launch. One day you won't be afraid of anything, but now you have fears about everything. And to the point of this talk, you can't have a fear that isn't born out of a desire. You cannot have a fear that isn't born out of, let me finish, a desire that you have identified with. Because there's nothing wrong with natural desires. You can't escape them. But here comes a fear. The fear doesn't exist without, we've talked about it before, negative imagination. I can't be afraid of anything at all unless my mind tells me this is what it means. And when it says what it means, it's contrasting it to what it is that I want life to be. So suddenly I'm resisting not the condition, but what my mind has projected as a condition that will interfere with what I want. Please, do you see it? Where does tension come from? Where does tension come from? Anybody? Resistance to what? Are we getting a picture here? But conflict doesn't begin with what we want or don't want. It just seems to appear that way because of a level of consciousness that we live in and from, a fallen consciousness, to use words that are loaded, so I shouldn't probably use them. And we don't understand that there is a natural desire. No moment exists that isn't the fulfillment of a natural desire and creating one at the same time. Can you get that far with me? Sunlight comes, fulfills the desire of the blade of grass to turn its chlorophyll into carbs. And the moment that it fulfills that desire, the new blade of grass, reborn through that moment, then has another desire for the next light, the next packet, the next flow, the next moment. Please, yes? And so without knowing it, we are always trying to stop life. Always, without knowing it, trying to bring an end to what I don't want through an imagined want that first produced the resistance, and then the new identity derived not only from what I don't want, but this is who I'm going to be when at last all of this works itself out. Please? You know, on our, yesterday, Saturday, Insight Timer, I described this. I want to recap it with you, that no psychological fear exists without some form of desire. We just looked at that. And that desire and that fear cannot be separated from what? Some form of identification with it. So that all wanting, regardless of how we understand it presently, and I made this point yesterday, I must touch on it briefly today, always creates the illusion of a time to come. Every desire produces the illusion of a time to come. Think of a desire that you have and that you still live with, I might add. You're still waiting to be made whole, are you not? Still waiting for God to come in your life, and you can say, oh no, he's already there, and all the rest of that nonsense. And in one respect it's true, or you wouldn't be interested in this. But the other side of it is you're waiting for something to come and rescue you from running into a moment that you don't want. And that's what you call God. And that is not God. That is mammon, which I'm going to talk about. So I have a moment I don't want, an anxiety, a fear, some kind of tension, and in that split second, my mind wouldn't be experiencing that disturbance if it hadn't come into that moment already determined to have what it wants or to escape what it doesn't, and boom, now I must have this or I must get away from that. And to have or to get away from isn't in the moment, is it? It's when at last I become free because of what I have done or won for myself. Please. So that desire is becoming. That order of desire is based in becoming. I want to become free, I just need to change you. I don't want to be a prisoner of this anymore, I just have to get there. So that every time there is this body that meets a moment that it doesn't want, it summarily chooses to escape. And by the way, and what am I trying to escape? Am I trying to escape the moment, or am I trying to escape a consciousness stirred awake for a moment that's going, no, I don't want that. So either way, time is involved anytime I'm identified with a desire. Please? So if all desire is about becoming, are you able to see that with me? All desire / image / identity. I hate to do that to you, but you can't separate them. We think that desire is separate from imagination, and imagination is separate from identification. It's a singularity, single movement. So everything about my life is I'm going to finally come to a place where I can rest. But I'm going to reach the point of rest by becoming. Anybody see a contradiction with that? Particularly when becoming involves not wanting anything that stands in the way of what I want to become. Please? So in other words, to make this little recap, in that moment, I don't have what I need to be. I imagine what I want in order to be, but I wouldn't have to imagine, nor would there be desire to achieve or arrive there if there weren't something in me that in that moment was certain that as I am, it's not okay. Not a problem. It's a problem to be me. And the way I know it's a problem to be me is I've had a reaction with something that I don't want to be. And therefore I have to imagine who I need to be and then get on with my life headed towards that long rest. What do you think the dark temptation is in the idea of the kingdom of heaven that you're sold by mechanical religion? The long rest that you deserve. You and I get every moment of our lives exactly what we deserve. And when you leave this body, it won't change. It's under law. All right. You ready? That's that. I've set the stage. Now we're going to populate it. So here comes a disturbance, and one that we can easily identify. Why do I know what the nature of the disturbance is? How do I know the nature of every disturbance that comes to me? You know why I have to ask these questions, even though you've already heard this? Because you don't realize that something in you tells you what just happened. And you believe that what's talking to you when you have this reaction is you. After all, it's the only voice I know, except the ones that I don't want. But I really need an authority in the moment where there's a disturbance, because somebody has to steer me and clear me of this problem that I've got. So the disturbance, when it comes not just with something telling me what's happened, but it tells me the meaning of what's happened. And I get all of that from my reaction in that split second. Please. So the reaction is what I look to reconcile the reaction I don't want. I've had a reaction I don't want. And where do I look to for the answer to get rid of this moment that I'm full of resistance to? The same mind that produced the reaction to it. If I had my candle, I should have just kept it going, but it would have melted all over my hand. Where in that moment, what am I looking for with that? What is that reaction looking for? What am I looking for as I'm identified with that reaction and I am? What am I looking for? I want an action that will free me from the consequence. Listen to this. I want an action to free me from the consequence of an action I took before. So that somehow or other, this action that I'm going to take that produced this consequence, this moment I don't want, my new action will be free of consequence because it's going to free me. And yet I've never had an answer that was given to me by my mind, by a reaction particularly. How many of you are wise enough to realize everything you regret in life, and you should have remorse, is because you fully identified with some reaction, it spoke for you, it moved you, it bought what it bought, it took you where it took you, and then when you got there, you go, God, I hate being here, what do I do? Candle gets lit. We're trying, without knowing it, to escape the consequence of being asleep to our own desire by letting desire tell us how to escape it. Now, can we prove that? Let's bring up, let me first put this. So what we need, because I'm trying to lead us to this idea, and it only comes by grace, is to see that no matter how hard we try to come up with a new order of understanding based on a reading and all that, no matter how much we try, as long as I'm acting from what is known, I'm acting from the past. No matter what. And all I know is to allow the reaction that seems very present and powerful to produce in me the answer to this moment that I don't want. And I get the answer from the reaction, and the reaction belongs to the consciousness that created the condition, and that is what? The continuation of the past. Just for a split second, let that in. What if I actually understood that every time I have a reaction, let alone identify with it and let it rule what I'm about to say or do, that I have just agreed to make a giant loop in an unconscious nature that pretends to be something other than the pain it just produced through its unconscious body of desire. Now, if I was able to be present enough, please listen, if I could be present enough, here would come a reaction. And if I actually knew that this reaction is like a very dark magician with a big fishing hook and line, if I knew that something is about to hook me, what would I do when the bait was dangled about, here's how you're going to feel better? What would I do? I just keep moving. Because I understand. I can't look to the past to free me. And the past and its conditioning is inseparable from the desires that formed this persona, my relationship to it. All right, so Kate, let's bring up this third key lesson. I'm going to go through this kind of slow because it's so important. Please shake off your sleep if you're nodding off out there. And if you're at home, pinch your leg or something. Don't get ahead of me. Listen. We know for a fact, or at least have glimpsed the following truth. There is another order of understanding beyond what thought can grasp, but that, on the other hand, is not beyond our awareness of the limitation of thought. Just hold on, don't go further. We know for a fact, because we have hopefully glimpsed this truth, there is another order of understanding beyond what thought can grasp, but on the other hand, that order of understanding beyond thought is not beyond my awareness of the limitation of thought. Now, what does that mean? Suddenly, I'm struggling with something, anxiety, fear, worry, and I've struggled for 1,000,000 years trying to be free of my anger and my resentment. And then one day, out of the clear blue sky, I see that what I'm struggling with, I've been struggling with for 5,000 years, and that I'll never be free as long as I continue to meet those moments from something that doesn't want to meet them or that believes it can control them. And in that split second, there is another kind of light. The light dwelleth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. Suddenly there's another light. And by that light, I see what a fool I've been. I can't escape myself turning to myself to help me escape, because that self is the prison. That level of consciousness is the contradiction. And all I've ever known to do is to allow the reaction, which isn't in thought and natural at its source, become something through association to connect me to a body of past experiences, by and large, bring up desires or not desires, and then once again, I have been defined and confined by my mind. Yes, please. That's the first part. Did everybody get that first part to some extent, yes or no? Part two. And not just implied in this revelation, but inherent within it, is an invitation for us to discover another order of action. And not just implied in this revelation. What's the revelation? That as I am, all I know is the limitation of thought, and yet within what I am is the awareness of that limitation. Please? So that suddenly, implied in that revelation is this discovery that, wait a minute, suddenly I have an action to take that I can't think about taking. It's just there. It isn't a want or a not want. It's just the clarity of a consciousness that every time it chooses what it wants or doesn't want in an unwanted moment, ensures that it will continue and I will remain a prisoner of its identification. Not just implied in the revelation, inherent within it, an invitation to discover another order of action. Oh God, where I'm not torn trying to figure out the choice. I'm not struggling to measure, well, this might produce that, and I don't really want that, so I got to shave a little bit of this and move it over to that side, and then, oh, that side's a little too heavy now because it's not going to be good for so-and-so downstream, so I got to shave a little bit off of that. And you wind up with a pile of crud, of stuff, mind stuff, empty mind stuff. And each and every one trying to resolve a conflict that only exists because I'm living from a mind that doesn't know what to do, but to go into conflict with everything that challenges what it desires. I know I'm sounding out a note. Let's take a negative reaction. Anybody want to pick one? Pick your favorite. You think that's a joke, but it's not. Every one of you has your favorite negative reaction. Blame? I should look a little bit like you right now. Blame. Now, in the moment of that blame, can I be blaming somebody without first resenting them? Can I? You do the math. Is it possible? Or in order to blame, must there be resentment? Can there be resentment without you having failed to achieve my happiness? Yes or no? So my resentment is that you are not what I need you to be. Au contraire, you are actually the opposite of what I need you to be in this moment. You are a thorn in my side. So if I'm blaming and I'm in the level of consciousness that is struggling to escape that moment by doing what? What are my choices when I am blaming? What are my choices when I'm blaming? I can go back and think about it and then talk to myself about, it's not a big deal. After all, I am a spiritual person. Yes or no? And Christ wouldn't blame people, I don't think. I don't know. Maybe he would. That's why he got angry. And then you see your mind going like that. So, all right, well, that didn't work because 2 days later, I have more resentment than I ever did. So the old, I'm going to pretend that didn't happen. I'm going to be a loving person. So next choice. Oh yeah, you know what? I was right in the first place. I nailed it. You are an idiot who doesn't care about anything and anybody but yourself. Whew. Now I know. So, because I have to go on. So, that mind is a binary mind. It only knows to try to identify with something more pleasant than wanting to punish you. And then when it can't find the contentment, the peace it needs in trying to be a spiritual person, then it turns into a justified spiritual person. Please God that you learn never, ever, ever, ever to justify hatred or resentment or regret or any of those things. Why? Because that is the only way that you will ever see that whether or not I try to become someone as imagined or I come to an unimaginable place where I have to lash out at you, either or of those solutions belong to who and what I have been, and they are a product of the consciousness that created the condition that I'm in, because I wouldn't be in the condition if I hadn't become dependent on you in the first place to save me from the experience of myself that I had when I left that other idiot in my life. I just threw in that last part for those of you who've had more than 18 partners. 2 partners? 3. So now what happens? Are you all following me? So now what happens? How am I doing on time? I start to realize, well, what I want here is to not be afraid, to not be anxious, to not be angry. That's what I want. Seems natural, doesn't it? But on the other hand, everything that I imagine that will free me from what I don't want just becomes the next ground. Well, I like that. Unconscious desire is a delay tactic. I've got this important meeting coming up. I've got to go talk to somebody about something that's very difficult. And by the way, what do you do when all that's going on? Think, plan it, work it out, get it so you can come out smelling like a rose, yeah? So you're already a mess. And one day I say, you know what? I've been trying to figure out how to be free, content, whole, how to be not anxious, how to not be afraid of the moment. You see, there's so many ways to go. I've asked this before, I'll ask it again. How can I be afraid of a moment that's never happened? How can I be afraid? Look, I have to go take this meeting. I've never been in that meeting before. I have to prepare something. I've never had to. This is new. And yet I'm terrified of the result, aren't I? So I have to make sure the result is the way I want it to be. Yes or no? So I essentially have decided that the fear that I'm feeling is viable and necessary because it's the only way that it's going to produce the result that I want. Yes or no? And what is the result that I want? I don't want to be afraid. All right, do any of you cuckoo? Because it's just like that. I actually live in a level of consciousness that is asleep to itself and deciding all the time what to do when anything that it has predetermined shouldn't happen takes place. Now, let's bring up the next important point. Everybody follow that key lesson to a certain extent? So here we have this binary. I covered this already. We can take that down. I covered that. Oh, that's fine. You can leave that up. All right. So. What have we learned? Well, we can't really say. That's the problem, isn't it? I've heard something. I understand something. But now I need to take what I understand and begin to, as best I can, remember it. Make it mine. I do know for a fact, even though I'm unable to choose otherwise, that reactions are always the result of negative reaction, always the result of resistance, always the expression of some desire that isn't fulfilled. And out of that, all I know is a binary set of choices that involve thought and imagination and identification. That much I know. Everybody on the same page? But I also know, and this is why you have to, this is why what's the word that I want? This is why the teaching must be passed along like this. I also have heard in the same day that there's an action that doesn't require me taking thought at all. The addict ceases to be an addict when he becomes aware of the nature that is addicted. Understanding that the nature that's addicted wants to save itself from itself through its addiction, and it can't be done. So an awareness of the addicted nature is the beginning of a new order of understanding that gives the addict a way in which to look at the moments where he or she wants to continue the self-destructive behavior as being something, I really want to do this, but I can't. And it's extraordinary that I really want to destroy myself. Who in me wants to destroy me? Who in me wants to relive the anxiety and the anger and the fear? Because it is an addiction that belongs to a level of consciousness that has no idea of its dependency on the identity that's been established through identifying with its desires. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You can't serve God and mammon. Now, I've talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it again ever so more deeply. Can we bring up the image of the yin and yang, please? Now, you're familiar with this because we've looked at it before. If you've never seen it before, this is, in quotes, an Eastern, but it's not just Eastern. This is a description in colors and form of, if you want to call it, two masters. Now, what you can't see, and I looked online for this, I wanted to find it. I can't believe nobody's thought of doing this. What I wanted was an animation of where you would see not only is this yin and yang, active and passive, affirming and denying, light and darkness, that you would see as it moves in this contained circle. You would see that as it moves, the dark is becoming light and the light is becoming dark, which is what the two dots in the middle of each of these active and passive forces represent. So you have here the quintessential. You have the quintessential description of the opposites. Heaven and earth, not separate. How else could the will of heaven be done upon the will of the earth unless the earth had something in it that corresponded to heaven? And vice versa. How would there be any relationship or intersection? And if you could see this, and unfortunately I can't, all I can do is this. Wax on, wax off. All I can do is try to help you to see that as in real life, this is a movement, not static. Our mind sees everything white, black. That's how it sees it. It doesn't see that what we said was white soon turns to black. Not negative, it turns to its opposite. My want turns to my not want. And that's natural, incidentally. And my not want becomes something that I do want. That's natural. And you have to have seen it. Have you seen some of this, yes or no? So what you're seeing here is this movement. Now, in order to show this the way it can be seen with the mind, there has to be a separation between the two of these things that aren't separate at all because they become one another. That's when Christ pointed out, you can't serve two masters. Please listen to this, just if you could just hear it. The word two, when Christ is speaking, is the word duo. You know the word duality? He's saying you can't serve duality. And what is duality other than what I love that creates what I hate, and what I hate that leads me to what I love to escape the pain of hating? So that we are, this consciousness is not yin or yang, but a trinity. And you can't see the trinity in this diagram. But the trinity is the place between the duality that is both places in the duality. That's the awareness without thought. That's the ground that doesn't move. That's the heart of the cross. Am I communicating? I'm always one or the other because that's all my mind can embrace and show me. It's all it can do. When Christ corrected the crowd that was stoning Mary, he said, well, go ahead, any of you that are without sin, throw the stone. And in that moment, he awakened those people to an awareness they didn't have the moment before because they were the white stoning the black. And suddenly I see, well, I got some black in me. Don't I? I'm full of rage. I sin every day. I just don't do it in the open like this person who I want to punish to the extent that I hide from myself my similarity. I don't know if I've made this clear enough. I'm trying to show you this bigger picture. It isn't yes or no. Isn't that how you see it? Yes, no. Isn't that how you see it? But that's not real. There is yes, I like oranges more than apples. There is no cilantro. Who'd have thought I'd be talking about cilantro for 45 years? Yes becomes no, no becomes yes. Want becomes not want becomes want. Only the awareness of that relationship between masters liberates you from being the slave of one and the lover of the other in that moment. You have, if I've communicated at all, at least a fledgling understanding that somehow, God help me, I need an understanding that I don't have when I'm suddenly pushed to have it. Because that is what takes place, isn't it? Suddenly I have to make an action. Why do I have to make an action? Why? I'm in pain. And I believe that the action that I'm pressured to take is going to somehow relieve me of my pain and produce, when I finally get there, a moment where I won't be in that pain anymore because I will have chosen what is needed for me to escape what I don't want or to get me to what I do. And I'm convicted to that, by that. Am I not? This is what makes the real work so difficult, is I have to start to understand that moment of conviction is literally, in the sense of the word, convicting me to live from a consciousness that can't do anything but choose the next thing it won't want or the next thing that it has to have. And only the awareness of that addiction to self would you ever believe that you're addicted to fear? Would you? No. You say, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm not addicted to fear. Addicted to anxiety? Would you say yes or no? You can take that down now. Well, I'm not addicted to anxiety. I deeply resent that. Am I addicted to resentment? No. And I really hate you for asking. And that's what I've become. Isn't it? There's no love there. If you could see the movement, if you could see the perfect, and it's not even right to use the word exchange, because even exchange seems to express the idea of duality. Is the sun that gives its life-giving light to the tree or the vine, is it separate from the vine that it feeds? Is the branch that grows from the vine separate from the vine that feeds it? Is it? And you can see, if you could, that without being able to see it with my mind, meaning with my intellect, I can actually understand Here comes this beautiful intelligence that gives rise to a galaxy that produces suns. Here comes a sun. Here comes the planet produced from the energies that it disavowed of itself when it gave its life up. And here's this planet, here's these people. All of this is in a constant movement. The law of thermodynamics, nothing can be created or destroyed, only transformed. That's what that represents. And it is the understanding, it is being a participant in that transformation that is the act of love. Because you can't participate in that transformation outside of it. You can only be a part of it. And that's what I'm trying to convey to you. Desire always imagines what it wants to be a part of. Yes or no? What it wants apart from. That's all it knows to do. So the very action of that mind looking to please itself, give itself some kind of peace, the very action of it produces separation. The very movement of it produces separation. And then, because it doesn't know what it's doing, it suffers the conflict inherent in that separation. It actually suffers the manifestation of its own action. But being blind to it, all it knows to do is to try to fix when it's suffering by coming up with the next thing to fix itself. Please? Can that mind ever escape itself? But is there a world that embraces and holds that consciousness without being a captive of it? Yes, there is. I am the light of this world. In it, but not of it. Put all the lessons that we have, coalesce them to bring the talk to a close, almost gather yourself. Doesn't desire seem to be a gathering? Yes or no? I desire this, I'm going to gather this to myself. Leave me alone. Go away, kid, you bother me. All right. I'll bring you in or I'll exclude you, and then I will have gathered myself again. Have I gathered myself or scattered myself when I look to the past, to my conditioning, to produce a path for me forward? Have I gathered myself on the upward path, or am I unknowingly on the downward path? Which is it? Downward path. I've scattered. Isn't that what took the prodigals? See, you have to be able to see it. I could sit here and wax on, wax off for like I don't know how many more years. But you have to do this work. I look to my desires to revive me. But what I'm exhausted by is my desires. Now, is there anything wrong with desire? Natural desire? Anything wrong with it? Absolutely not. But we don't know a lot about natural desires, because even our so-called natural desires, like for instance, I have a natural desire to eat. I'm hungry. Natural desire, yes or no? Natural desire to have some liquid. Natural, yes or no? Natural desire for company. Yes or no? Natural. But when I have to have a specific thing to drink, not natural. When I have to have a certain kind of food, not natural, apart from organic if you can afford it. On the other hand, is it natural to bemoan my life? Here's a person that can't afford organic food. It's expensive. It's insane what this world has done. And just to bring this up, do you know why the world has absolutely gone berserk? Because desire can't answer itself. It just has to create something more that it will charge more for to prove that it's more valuable. And everybody's scrambling for that creates scarcity. So the very consciousness that's trying to save itself is producing its prison and its destruction and its corruption, I might add. How do we end this talk? Wanting, not wanting, natural. It's even natural in one respect. You know, there are people, you've all met them, all of us have. You can meet somebody, you don't know them at all. And they don't look like anybody that's rubbed you wrong. And there's not a symmetry, there's a disharmony, yes or no? Now that's natural. But where it becomes unnatural is when you then allow that resistance, which is natural. You have run into something. Oh, I wish I had. This is like another entire talk. I'm going to give a whole talk. How many of you get rubbed wrong quite often? Next Wednesday, we're going to talk about getting rubbed wrong. How can I be rubbed wrong unless my grain is going in a certain direction? Right? So if I'm rubbed wrong, what you're showing me is my grain. Love allows for grain, but it isn't determined by it. Can you see that? Love is understanding that love is you showing me where I'm incapable of love as long as I'm identified with only what I want and don't want. Remember the place of perfect love casts out fear? We talked about that yesterday. We close with that today. I'm talking to you about this place of. How faint it is, tenuous, to be able to have even a split second where instead of being identified with, I don't want this problem, go away, don't please, it's too soon, I'm not enough. How faint it is just in the onset of that initial resistance, please, where before the natural resistance becomes the unnatural reaction and its corresponding identity. To be in that place of the awareness of how this yin and yang, how these active and how all of that is coalescing and moving, and to be in that place where you see it is a movement. You see one does not exist without the other. And in the seeing of that is an action that you don't take, but that you are given to take by the clarity of the observation. So there's no chooser there. No choice at all, other than the one that is made for you by the intelligence that is the center, if you will, the place where the duality exists that embraces the duality without being identified with either side. It makes the choice. It's there, and it can't harm itself. It won't. The only way we ever harm ourselves is by taking a position that we think is for ourselves or against ourselves. That's the harm. And again, all of this has natural places, but you have to understand the bigger picture so that you, by God's grace, can begin to understand the task in this moment is not for me to come up with a decision that's going to free me and deliver me from my pain. That's not my job. It's become my job because of imagination. My job in the moment is my Father's business. That was last Sunday's talk, wasn't it? My Father's business is what? My Father's business is to see that everything that needs to act will be acted on, and it will then become the actor. All of that taking place, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, however you want to describe it, the Trinity, everything producing the next birth. And when you are present enough, you are not separate from what is born in that moment, in that awareness. And this is the amazing thing. And because that new understanding is the nature of wisdom itself, love itself, it's not afraid. It understands that it has been brought into existence. It has been given a moment of illumination, and that illumination will see to everything that needs to be done without having to be afraid, worried, or anxious about it at all. It will do for you what you have been unable to do for yourself, which is another piece of scripture, isn't it? It isn't I who do what I do, it's my Father who does what he does. This is all possible for you. You can sense it, I trust, from our talk. Let's take a break.
Welcome back, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute with our questions and answer time with Guy. First, I want to give you all a reminder. Some of you don't need it, and we appreciate those of you who are already helping us in so many different ways, but that all these classes, these online classes, are sponsored by the nonprofit Life of Learning Foundation here in Southern Oregon, where Guy is the director. And if you'd like to help us, please know that every donation that you make, no matter the size, we always say that because it really does, it all adds up, helps us to reach out and help others around the world with these teachings. If these teachings are resonating with you, then you know that they can help other people as well. So whatever you can do to help us is great. And if you're in the United States, all donations are tax deductible. And at any time, go to guyfinley.org/donate. And you can make a donation, very simple right there. And also, if you go to that link, there's other ways that you can help the foundation that cost you nothing. So do take advantage of that, and we do appreciate all those who are already helping us and all of those who will right now. So you can do that at any time. All right, let's get started with the rest of our class. Well, before I do that, I do want to mention, just keep on your calendar that this particular talk, which I know for me there's so much in it to be able to work with, that Friday night there will be a discussion group. We'll work with all of the students to where we'll study it together. We'll look at it and we'll discuss it, and that's Friday night at 7 p.m. So put that on your calendar, these study groups every Friday night. And then as always, guys, Saturday morning Insight Timer, which is that other website that you can go to, insighttimer.com, and then all this time every week. And you will get reminders for all this, so we appreciate your participation. And that's what's going to happen now. We appreciate your participation in joining us. We do have a couple hands already in the queue, and we have 3 written questions, but we invite you, actually there's 3 in the queue. We invite you to go ahead and raise your hand or write a question behind the scenes. Before we get started, I'll see if Guy wants to say anything more before I dive into this part.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Well, then let's start with Isabella first in the queue. Isabella?
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Hi, Isabella. Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Hi there. Hi. So first off, I just wanted to tell a little joke that a friend of mine, I love cilantro, but he hated it. And he always said, do you know what the worst thing about cilantro is? It gets in your mouth.
I will add that to my arsenal and take personal credit for it.
Yes. So like Doug was saying, you've answered probably my question before I even ask it, but I just wanted to share because this holds so much. And I went through this just yesterday and I realized I'm always waiting for the shoe to drop.
Right.
Or the fires in California, or, whatever it is. There's a myriad of things. And I realized that I see that loop of reincarnation. I watched your talk, the afternoon talk last night, and just seeing that my desire is only setting up that condition of fear.
Exactly.
And, at the moment that this happened yesterday, I was like, okay, I'm asking, I know it's not me. I can't, I was like a ping pong ball. I could see it. And, I can sit there and, say, well, it was how I was raised. I have a lack mentality, or it's this or it's that. It's not. It's what's happening in the moment. And I told myself the answer is here. It's a singularity. And I wanted to ask you about that experience, the observing, because I did feel like such a ping pong ball. And you showed the yin yang. And if you could see it spinning fast, the background of it was gray. And it would actually turn into gray and disappear into that background. That's the singularity. Yes. Like I saw it with that yin yang.
Yes.
So I'm always trying to find the awareness. So yes. What can you tell me?
Okay, so yes. First, take a nice deep breath, because we do get wound up. Yeah. I mean, we do. The sleeping mind is a winding mechanism that all it knows to do to relieve itself from its tension is to wind itself up. And it does that, hopefully following the analogy, get to a time when it's going to escape the tension that it has produced in itself by trying to escape itself. It's just built into it. To see that is the beginning of something new. So, to help you understand this, because like yesterday with Kate in our discussion that we had at lunch yesterday, it is the nature of this of duality. It is the nature of this mind in its divided state. Now, we cannot escape the fact that the mind, like everything that has come through the ray of creation, is subsequently divided. It's inescapable. No self exists apart from what acts upon it. So that in the scale of things, creation by nature is divided. But it is acted upon that which consistently brings those opposites into a new form, so that then the division serves a deliverance of something new. Can you understand that at all? But that mind always, as she was describing, it looks at this and goes, "Oh, look at the way I am, and I know that I should be aware, but I'm not." We all share that. And then when I know I should be aware, but I'm not, then I think to myself, well, when am I ever going to be aware when I need to be? Follow the bouncing brain. So here's a way to understand this. First, you must persist. You must have proper patience with yourself. Here you are, and let's say you're a mother or a father. Maybe you've been a mother or a father. And your child will make the child 5, 6, 7 years old. You hear a shriek. You run into the child's bedroom at night. Kid's got the blanket over its head, crying. What's going on? In my day, it was a boogeyman, a werewolf, a monster in the closet. Now, you can never tell that child, even though you will tell that child, there's no monster there. Child experienced a projection of its own consciousness, probably conditioned and corrupted by the very things that you let the child watch, so that it saw what it didn't want to see by a mind that created it so that it could produce the sensation of self. The mind actually desires the fear it creates. The mind actually desires the fear it creates. It's incomprehensible. Child will never understand that, right? But you are not the child. But the child lives in you. And I'm not talking about that psychological stuff. Please, if you're calling, please don't, I don't want to talk about the inner child. I'm saying that in me is something that doesn't understand what I can. In me is something that can't be aware of itself, but that I can be aware of the fact that it can't be aware of itself. Do you see this? So then the child can just go on and you do the things you do with a child. But you don't imagine, God, go in the room, what's there? There's a monster, and you go, oh, there is! That wouldn't do the kid any good, would it? You get under the covers with the kid. I hope it goes away. That's what we do now. It's exactly what we do. So now you have to stop being the baby. You have to stop being the immature aspirant. And the way you stop is by seeing that something wants you to start. It wants to get you involved. Your awareness of something tempting you to be involved with judging yourself is the beginning of the end of that identity derived from that consciousness. Everybody grasp some of that? Let's go on, Doug.
All right, let's take our first written question. It came in, I think yesterday or last night, from Rodiani.
Yeah.
And you might have it in front of you there, Guy. She, I'm not sure which, says, someone who does not have an especially spiritual background in self-development asks for 1 to 2 hour session for psychological help for a phobia and difficulty in feeling trust in relationships. No opportunities for more sessions. I am certified in ordinary psychological methods, and I'm 99% sure that he will feel relief in our session. I realize that these methods function on the level of the lower consciousness, the level of the senses, mind, and thought. I also know about and see the high importance and urgent need of what you are teaching, and I could speak a little in this direction, as much as can be said in 1 to 2 hours on a very elementary level. I do not know what the result may be, and I understand that the result may come from higher help too. I feel that I should not ask you to tell me what to do, but I would appreciate some comment on the situation as it may be appropriate.
Everybody understand Rodiani's? He's trained in certain, we'll call them spiritual disciplines, and that apparently he helps people. They come to him for some kind of paid consultation, and he straightens them out. But he's starting to realize that he's not so straight himself, basically. So I still want to do what I need to do. I need to make a living. I'm trained here. But I also understand that my training needs a little bit more of your coloration instead of the content that I suspect might get him over the hump, but it doesn't free him of the camel. You know, Rodiani, over the years, I can think of several people that have studied with me, psychiatrists, psychologists, and they all start as the great knowing, and then little by little, by the grace of God, they begin to suspect that they shouldn't be quite as certain about what they are and what they do. And then they run into this point in life, which you are running into now, and that everybody here who actually believes they are a psychiatrist and a psychologist, ask me, I know. You run into a point where you begin to realize that what you called your certainty was actually a false certainty. And now I'm dealing with the beginning, the onset of some uncertainty that I don't know what to do with. But he's wise enough, and he puts in his commentary, that I think that I should go ahead in my uncertainty. I just don't know what will become of the relationship if I don't talk from who and what I've been, but rather from what I see and want to understand myself. And that's your answer, Rodiani. Nothing wrong with what you've learned. If nothing else, it served as the ground for discovering that it's incomplete and impartial, of no consequence in some areas at all. And that it's no good just to give somebody relief as long as you know that's all you're giving them. Most people don't know any better than that. Why do I take a drink or do a drug? I think it gives me some relief. And one day I realize I'm not getting relief. What I am is putting on I'm postponing the pain of this desire that isn't satisfied by the world. I don't know what else to do. Well, at some point I just have to go into it, don't I? That's what you have to do, Rodiani. Go into it. Bring yourself into it as best you can. helping him not from some staid position or posture that you know is approximate to the problem, but rather be as present as you can with who you're talking to and give them from yourself. And sometimes, Oriana, you might have to say, look, I'm working on this. See, that's the last thing people want to say. You'll never hear a psychiatrist say, I'm working on this myself, because then I can't charge you $498 for 2 minutes. No, I have to be an authority. That's what I want to say. Don't be an authority. Be an explorer. Be someone who's looking to learn. Then you'll help somebody who wants to learn. And if they don't want to learn, off you go. Over to you, Doug.
Let's go next to Nick in the queue. Nick, you need to unmute yourself. Hopefully we can. There you go.
Thank you. Guy, thank you. As everybody said, so much has been said, and of course, I must tell you, I'm a little bit wound up. I came in a little bit late, and you spoke about a candle. And over the past few days, I've been thinking about how much my life has been blowing out that candle that keeps on getting relit, doing the same thing over and over again, and just blowing it. Or another analogy, if I may bore you with, trying to lift weight off the ground is glued to the ground.
Yeah.
All that effort is useless.
Right.
And this addiction to self, I've also recognized it was like a thread that's drilled so deep into my bare bone marrow. It's like, my God, how in the heck did I let go and get loose? And I'll just close with, if I can find my note here, what you said. If there's a spare moment, a blip where there's maybe a higher self, it's like my mind is the last to know. It's the last to find out. And you spoke just loosely about uncertainty. Is my uncertainty born? If I can weave it into a thought question, uncertainty born of fear or faith? Is that a correct way to ask a question? Is my uncertainty born of fear or faith? Because they're both uncertain. I know my fear has a lot of hate behind it, and boy, I got a lot of fear. But anyway, that's my thought. Thank you.
Take a deep breath, Nick.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take a couple of them.
Yeah.
Uncertainty is always in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
It wants to flee from what it fears may happen in its uncertainty into the freedom of a certainty it provides itself from a consciousness that's the very source of its conflict. And I didn't make out the words you were talking about. Is it fear or fate? And if you were wise, you would throw away the word fate for now. Never give another thought to it. Because when you think of fate, you can't help but divide it up into good or bad. And the moment that you decide what is good and what is bad fate, you live in the constant fear that one will appear at the expense of the other. And so you create the fate that you fear, and that happens to be a fact. On we go, Doug.
All right, we'll take one of the written questions, and this is from Susanna. She asks, what would be a representation of the third consciousness? If not the white and not the black, then the circle that encircles both.
I'm hesitant to examine the philosophy. I wasn't talking to you about philosophy. I was showing you a fact that's evident in your own consciousness, in your own experience, if you could see it. Has the active part, which we don't know much about. What we call active is the reaction of a passive nature. And no reaction is active in and of itself. No reaction is active in and of itself. It is always the result of something acting on it. Is what is active, if what was active, if the will of God could just by its existence, turn and transform what is passive into what it willed it to be, I wouldn't have anything to do. We'd all be little saints and angels walking around on this planet, loving one another because that's the nature of that intelligence. Is that the way it is? On the other hand, if I'm just the passive part, I can't change anything about myself. I'm just passive. Can the leaf change itself? Is there anything for the sun to change without a leaf? So there's a distinct relationship between what is active and what is passive, and neither one can transform either by itself, and both must coalesce in a certain place at a certain point in order to produce a new birth. So that which reconciles the relationship between active and passive is the third, the Holy Spirit. Because without them having a place to meet, and without something determining what it is that's intended to come out of that relationship that is obviously there before and greater than what is involved, nothing can happen and nothing would change. Everything would be death. And in one respect in this world, everything is death. In this world, everything is death because the opposites by themselves cannot produce anything new. The law of thermodynamics, unless another force is introduced into those active and passive forces, all they can do is divide and create more chaos. But something exists that can come and does come in, and that lives within us, this light in the darkness, that is capable of producing this new relationship so that something comes out instead of something going down. That's the best I can do. On we go, Doug.
Okay, let's go next to Tony in the queue.
Guy, and this is why I keep coming back. This is why I keep coming back.
I'm waving the white flag.
All right. So, nature does seem divided, but it's not exactly because of everything you're saying.
Yes.
But the problem with us is that we need to see things before we believe it.
Yes.
Unlike what Wayne Dyer's book about I'll see it when I believe it. I just love that, And, we sent the Hubble telescope out into space, and we just need to see things. And with that yin yang, it's really about dark matter and white matter. And if you think about the universe, which is space, dark matter, it's the biggest thing out there, and it's in us.
Yes.
We're all one. So you know where I'm getting at. I'm saying that in essence, the opposites, there seem to be opposites. There's actually an energy fusion always going on.
Yes.
If we accept that darkness with us, and that I even think the planets come from the dark. What are these wormholes? There could be rooms for all we know. We don't know. Who's to say I'm wrong? I think the dark matter, that unconditional intelligence that informs us and is always with us.
Yeah.
And we cannot choose, like you said,
Yes.
what we are given to think, say, or do.
You know what I like, Tony, out of all this? I like that that there's a fire in you. And for God's sake, we make the worst mistake in the world. If something lights up inside of me and I can sense something right, I didn't light myself up. I'm not even what got lit up. I'm the experience of the meeting, and let that meeting continue unhindered so that out of that can grow another order of flame, another kind of spirit. Then I'm not limited to my own determination as to what this means or doesn't mean. God willing, I'm free of meaning. Oh, what a blessing that would be. I'm free of the past. Good job, Tony. On we go,
It's
John.
evolving. It's always creating.
Yes.
We're always, do you really worry that sometimes, have I done enough in this life? Am I doing all that I can to express this amazing intelligence in this life.
But no, you don't try to be that. How can I try to be what I am? If I am that, all I need to do is see with greater clarity, Tony, because we've been going at this for a while now, with greater clarity, not with how do I manifest this, how do I get out of the way of its manifestation? And that's all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. And I got to stop, Tony. I got other people I got to go to. I do love the enthusiasm. I'll see you next time. On we go, Doug.
All right, here's a written question from Kumar Jerry. He says, "Sir, what do you think of this? Our parents' sins will haunt the children. Is there such a thing as generational curse? How to correct it if there is such a thing? Is it biblical?"
Well, it is written in the Bible, but it's not biblical. I'm just hesitating, Kumar, because I'm trying to decide whether I want to, and I do, I'm going to speak at great length about this seeming disparity between the things that my father and his father did and myself. All that my father did, I'll say it this way. All that I have done in this life that has been a source of pain or sorrow, of greed and fear and its conflict, everything that I've done in this life, I did because I didn't know I was doing it, but it doesn't mean that I'm not responsible for it. Because the things that were done in my name was done by an unnamed consciousness actually looking to name itself, to be something. And that consciousness is not Guy's, and it's not Kumar's, and it's not Terry's, and it's not Debbie's, and it's not Roger's. Mammon is the consciousness of humanity at this time. Insatiable appetite. When the man or woman realizes that they have an insatiable appetite for fear, which you can't even imagine. We talked about it, didn't we? An insatiable appetite for going back in the past and wishing things were this way, an insatiable appetite for guilt, an insatiable appetite for judging myself. And you say, no, I don't, and that's all you do. So one day, the addict sees his insatiable appetite not as his own, but of something that has the appetite because it needs to feed itself destruction. It needs to feed itself conflict. It has to have it. And then begins the struggle. And when I struggle, because I have seen, it isn't the struggle of resistance, it is the struggle of understanding I must not step into his shoes. He must walk on without me. Get behind me. Must, not resistance. Intelligence, awareness that understands what that nature doesn't understand about itself. And in that, Kumar, I begin to pay for what I've done. And when I pay for what I've done, I'm paying for what my father did because I am not separate from my father. Because all I could do was what my father did, and all my father could do was what his father did. Each and every one just reconfiguring the conditions according to the culture and the environment and the economic circumstances. The same nature, just spewing itself out, hoping that something's going to come out looking good. And it does for a moment, but then it doesn't, then I've got to redress myself. That's how it works, Kumar. And what hope there is in that. And if you even understand that, one day you'll get this idea that it's a blessing to have a family with problems. because you have some extra stuff to work with. Yeah. Not to hate, not to resent, not to regret, not to wish it wasn't this way, and how come I was like that and they did this to me. All of that's, I almost said a word. All of that's bad stuff. On we go, Doug. A couple more and then we'll bail.
Okay, we have 2 in the queue and 3 written questions, Guy. Should we take the 2 in the queue?
So we'll do the 2 in the queue and whatever the first of the last written questions was, and then I promise if you've submitted a question, I will answer it on Wednesday. You'll be first up.
Okay, let's go to Irene.
Irene. Down under. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Irene.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Pretty sure I can.
Hi. Sorry, because I'm talking from my mobile phone, which I don't usually do. I wanted to thank you very much because you got me through this difficult phase where I was finally divorcing, and it was very civilized, and I felt that I got through it. And then once that was, I got through that. The following day, I was on the plane, which was nice, and my youngest son got graduated, and I'm feeling, ready for new beginnings and blessed. So I just wanted to thank you, basically.
Oh, Irene, I'm very happy for you. Not so much for the conditions that unfolded the way you wanted them to, but that you've been able to learn something from those conditions so that each and every time they reappear in the new form that they will, so that you can be free of the old Irene. You'll have better understanding about how to observe and participate properly in those moments. Good. Glad, Irene. On we go, Doug.
Thank you.
All right, next is Neil.
Hi, Guy.
Hi, Neil.
Been listening to you for a long time, and I'd like to think I've learned a few things. I have.
Let's hope so.
Guy had a Guy's greatest hits on working on ourselves. You said during the talk, you can lead us to places and the concepts, but we have to do the work.
Yes, sir.
Top 3, top 5. Guys, 1. What do we do? Basically, is what I'm asking. What work do we do?
Did he just say, what do we do?
No laughing.
Neil!
Serious.
All right, so Neil, here we go.
Okay, sir.
Your official name is not Neil anymore, it's Neo.
Very well. I'll listen to anything.
And you must, every moment that you're aware, that you can be aware of yourself, decide whether to take the red pill or the blue pill. Do I go into thought and try to deal with whatever this is that's troubling me? Do I try to get rid of it again? Do I push her away? Do I try to pull this in? Do I reincarnate Neil? Or does Neo understand I must take the pill that shows me everything about Neil, because now I'm not going to go along with Neil. My first interest is going to be to see and understand how his life has been taken from him, so that in the awareness of Neil, I begin to develop an understanding that was always and already there. Then I gradually move from a place, to use words, where all of my awareness has been trying to deal with problems, into a place where the problem becomes the ground of a new awareness. I turn it around. And I turn it around with the wish, and then the work as best I can. And then when I see that I didn't even think about doing that work, I now know something more about Neil. So Neo grows. The first becomes the last becomes the first. That's it, Neil. Go to work. I'll talk to Neo next week. Over to you, Doug.
All right, this is the first of the questions, and Mary and Judith will get to yours on Wednesday.
Please.
And then I'll hand it back to you after this. And this comes from Dwight, our friend from Texas.
Yep.
And he asks, recently I traveled to Santa Fe. It was very cold, and I had several layers of clothes on. My cell phone was in a jacket. After deboarding and going to a restaurant, I did not have my cell phone. Quick reaction of anxiety. Did all the usual searches and went back to the airport to see if anyone had retrieved it off the plane. No luck. Sir, that plane was headed back to DFW, they told me. Then the anxiety started searching for scenarios. I realized it wasn't the loss of the phone that was continuing the anxiety. I realized it was the anxiety that I was afraid of, not the loss of the cell phone. My friend said, "You seem awfully calm about this, unlike my history. The phone will be either lost or eventually found, but more importantly was the inner realization."
Worth its weight in gold. It's actually a perfect way to end the class, because what he's describing is that instead of having this moment where anxiety born of, and he even describes it, not just the immediate fear of some physical loss, but God, what if they uncork my phone, or whatever they say, what if they hack my phone and get into my Venmo and my Shmomo and my Blago and all the things that I've done to make my life better that now are the source of my terror. Jesus, what is wrong with you all? Honestly. Everything you do to simplify your life makes it worse. So here I am, and I'm actually, for the first time in my life, there is an intelligence looking at stupidity. Stupidity is anxiety trying to free itself. That's stupidity. That's the definition of insanity, isn't it? So suddenly there's intelligence looking at stupidity, not judging Dwight or even that consciousness. But it is dumb. It is deaf, it is blind. It cannot know what it does to itself. Suddenly, I'm aware of that consciousness, and out of that awareness is the action of what? I'm not going to hurt myself for you. I'll suffer you because I have to. But in suffering you, I begin to die. Not just, I'll end on this, not just to you, I begin to die for you. So that you can go through something that can't be gone through unless I do that. Otherwise, you'll never be aware of yourself. You'll never know that you can't change yourself. You'll never know it. So Dwight, spot on. Send an extra $3 in. That's it. Anybody want to, unless there's something? No, there's not. Goodbye.